Welcome back. Now to politics. Nigeria's Senate is moving to impose tougher penalties for vote buying and other electoral offences as the country gears up for the 2027 general elections. Senate Leader Opeyemi Bamidele says the measures are outlined in the Electoral Bill 2025, now before the National Assembly. Under the proposal, vote buying could attract fines of up to 5 million naira, a possible 2-year prison term, and a 10-year ban from contesting elections. The bill also recommends mandatory prison sentences and increased fines for offences including result falsification and obstruction of election officials. Now we're joined by Todimu Ige, a lawyer and public affairs analyst, all the way here in Lagos. Todimu, good afternoon and thank you for joining us. The Electoral Bill 2025 proposes stiffer punishments for vote buying, including jail term, long-term disqualification from elections and all that. How realistic is this enforcement of these penalties, knowing fully well that we're always good at creating committees and not seeing any result, also given the past difficulties in prosecuting electoral offences in Nigeria?
Yes, you have stated the issues succinctly, and the truth of it is that we are not as a nation, we have a plethora of laws. What really matters is enforcement. And you see that a lot of time when we have these laws, the enforcement becomes a problem. Yes, laws are meant to be reviewed, revised, and to make them realistic. Yes, the law can be improved, but are we ready to walk the talk and enforce these provisions of the law? Because as it stands, the last election, we heard that there were buckets of violence, vote buying and all that. How many people were tried? So we need to leave the era of just making laws. We need to actually do better in terms of enforcement of these policies.
Right. Of course, we've been talking about, existing laws like you mentioned, but there's no enforcement. And of course, vote buying is widespread. We hear it all the time when it's close to election. What does this particular timing now of this proposed reform suggest about, political calculation ahead of the 2027 general elections?
Well, what it means is that what the members of the House of Assembly, National Assembly, what they're trying to do is to see that they sanitize the system before the election comes. But one will now wonder, why is it coming so close to when elections are coming up next year? This should have been attended to before now. And by the time we start these enactments now, we now begin to have issues of implementation. That's why you begin to hear, oh, we need to gazette, we need to do this, we need to do that. Can we shift elections further? Can we, so we ought to have started all this before now, because they had about 3 or 4 years to implement this. So that the last act was in the current provision is 2022. And they've had 3, this is going to be the 4th year. And they ought to have started that. Away from that, if they are trying to revise the law, then it should be done timeously, and the implementation should begin forthwith.
Now, Todimu, of course, the electronic voter identification and mandatory electronic transmission of results was introduced. Are there any legal protections that exist to address, for any reason, if we have technical failures or disputes that may arise during this election?
Yes, and that should be addressed. The law should be looked into and see if there is, like I've stated, if there is a glitch, what are the other options? We should have option A, B, or C, and the necessary steps to follow to address or mitigate any challenge that is found to have occurred in the last election or previous elections. And the essence of amendment of any law or any act is to see that law is improved and better. So that's what those are the steps that we should look at. It should not just talk about stiffer penalties. We should also look at how do we address the issue of logistics? What can be done to make these laws more realistic and enforceable?
Right. Well, Todimu, thank you. 2027 is really going to be a wonderful year, and then we hope to see how this will pan out. We'll keep following up, and of course, we'll always call you for more conversations. Thank you, Todimu Ige.
All right, thank you for having me.